This is Greg Arabian, Public Information Officer for Post 41, Watertown AmVets, Corporal Paul S. Masubian, Post 41 AmVets in Watertown, Mass. And I'm interviewing today a veteran of World War II and a member of Post 41. This is Jack Achmakjian. And Jack, where do you live?
I live in Wellesley right now.
Okay. And are you married?
I'm married, yep.
And what was your educational background before you went into the service?
I got out of Watertown High. I lived in Watertown as a youth. I got out of Watertown High School in 1944. And then after going in the service, I lived again in Watertown until '57.
And is it from Watertown that you were inducted into the service?
Yes.
And did you enlist, or did you...
Oh, we were all drafted. I was in the same class as a few of the post members like Jim Adikian, and we all got drafted. And Jim beat me in the service by a month or two because I got yellow jaundice in April of '45. And that delayed my induction, my draft by 2 months. So I went in June of '45. Most of my friends were in early '45.
And that was about, that was after the death of Franklin Roosevelt.
Franklin Roosevelt died just about the time I had the jaundice. That was April of '45, that's correct.
Okay. And at the time of the war, were you, well, of course the war had ended in Germany at that time.
The war ended in May, so
okay.
I was drafted actually in June.
Were you married then?
No.
You're single? Okay.
I was single.
And where did you go?
We went to Camp Croft, Greg, and I'll tell you, that was my first great experience in the Army. Camp Croft, South Carolina, very memorable to me because we had a great time. We were in with a bunch of Massachusetts and Pennsylvania people, but at Camp Croft, we went through all the training. We were going to be in intelligence and reconnaissance. We were going to be sent to Japan. But at Camp Croft, they had the first prisoners of the German Africa Corps.
Oh, really?
And we used, yeah, they were doing all the menial jobs on trucks, picking up the garbage and so forth. And we were all skinny 18-year-old kids. And I'll tell you, we used to look at these guys. They were always stripped to the waist, blonde, big, husky, muscular guys. And in those days, they called them supermen. And we used to look at these guys, and I'll tell you, they were all powerhouse guys.
They were?
Yeah, they were big. They were the original Africa Corps, and they got captured and sent to Camp Croft. And that was a very nice time we had down there.
Did you, and so when you say they picked up the garbage and did the menial jobs,
yeah.
Is this to keep their camp running?
Yeah, they did all that kind of stuff. And we were in there in the summertime, so I think they had some of them also in the kitchens doing some of the potato peeling and stuff like that, because we saw them around, but they kept them segregated and we had no contact with them at all.
Do you know of any attempts, did you witness any attempts to escape, or do you know of any attempts to escape?
No.
Were they defiant, or did they just agree?
The only time we really saw them is when they went around the camp and picked up in the trucks, and all I can say is I could see then the discipline that was there. I mean, each truck had what looked like the commander or the officer, and boy, he'd bark out some of the commands in German and they'd snap to it, you know. And we had a movie actor that was doing a lot of these Nazi films, and one of the officers reminded me of him. Boy, he'd open his mouth, they'd all snap to. They weren't young kids, they were more like 25, 28, and well-disciplined, as I say, and never acted up, and we never could mix with them. So all we were just observing what they were.
Them. So when you were at Camp Croft, what was your specialty?
Intelligence and reconnaissance. We went in the woods, and we didn't wear belts, and we blackened our face. We were going to be in that area. And at that time, the Japanese war was going on. There was no atomic bomb. So we thought we were eventually going to end up over there.
Mm-hmm. And what unit were you assigned to?
We were an Engineer Combat Battalion, 290th Engineer Combat Battalion, or 282nd. I don't know, we melded into one or the other.
What did your training consist of?
It was mostly in scouting intelligence, and we had to go through the barbed wire on our stomachs with the bullets going over our head. It wasn't really I didn't regard it as a tough training because in high school we played football, baseball. We were in good shape. Mm-hmm. And I have to confess, I enjoyed that whole thing. I really liked it a lot. We got to know a lot of people. It's the first time I was out of state, and it was a good experience.
Uh-huh. And where and when did you end your service?
I ended the service after a year and a half. In November of '45, we came back by boat, and actually December of '46. So I was in exactly a year and a half, and exactly 12, maybe 13 months in Germany.
In Germany?
Yeah. And
so you didn't go to the...
No, we didn't go there. The war ended, and they sent me, that was a good break.
And while you were in Germany, what did you do?
Well, we went to Germany, and I think my next great experience was, and this is a coincidence because this involves a guy that's in the post now that I never even knew. They sent us to Würzburg, Germany. Mm-hmm. Würzburg is how it's pronounced, and that's the home of the Würzburger beer that you see in this country a lot. And I had the fortune of being assigned to the Würzburger Hofbrauhaus. That was our office. Mm-hmm. And one of the post members, Eugene Rafaelian, was there. He saw combat, and he was stationed at the Hofbrauhaus. Uh-huh. And he saw my name on a list of people. He saw the Armenian name, so he said, let's get that guy here. And I got into the personnel office, and I replaced Gene as the company clerk. And I was only a private. 6 months later, I was a tech sergeant. I got promoted every month because the job called for a tech sergeant. And I had a German secretary. I wasn't even 19 years old. But Gene was going back, and we just knew each other for a short time.
Wonderful.
And
now you say
Gene remembers that, too. I saw him here about 4 or 5 months ago, and I'd seen Gene a couple of times since the war.
Now, the Würzburger House, was that a brewery?
It's a brewery.
And did you convert it into a headquarters?
We were in the servants' quarters for where we stayed.
Were they making beer at that time?
No, they had shut down just temporarily. But we were in the servants' quarters. We had our own little apartment with a little wood stove, and their administrative office was our personnel office. And I was a tech sergeant there. An interesting thing on the Würzburger Hofbrauhaus was in 1943. I jimmied over the files, and I took some papers home, newspapers. In 1943, they celebrated the 300th anniversary, and Goebbels is in the article congratulating them because they started in 1643. So in Würzburg, the thing that shocked me with Würzburg is the city was totally destroyed, sort of a university town and everything, and British bombers came along on March 25th of '45. They leveled the city with fire bombs. The city burned for a week. It was totally wiped out.
Is this similar to the experience, for instance, in Dresden, where they completely flattened Dresden as well?
Something like that. Yeah. Something
and
like that.
Where you stayed was escape that danger, I suppose.
Yeah, the Würzburger Hofbrau wasn't hit. And there's a castle that's very well known up on the hill, Marienburg Castle, that was very slightly hit. That has a chapel and things going back several hundred years. And there's a well-known residence palace that has, the bishops used to stay there for a couple of hundred years, and that was very, very slightly hit. I'm sorry, it was hit, but repaired. And that had on the ceilings Michelangelo paintings. It was very beautiful. But most of the city was destroyed. We used to go into the city, and it was just rubble everywhere. Really? Something like you thought Berlin was.
How far outside of Würzburg did you go? Or did you just stay in the rim?
No, we stayed. We were fortunate. Somehow we had a disposal of a company car, a Mercedes, and some of us would take it on weekends, and we'd go out to the suburbs, the country, and we'd go out and drink champagne. We had a good time. But we visited some of the streets, some of the cities outside of Würzburg. An interesting thing is, I don't know if he's a member, Mike Arslanian, is he a member of the Post?
I know of
He's
him.
Mike had a girlfriend in Germany. He was in the service, and she lived outside Würzburg in Schweinfurt, which is a ball bearing factory.
Yes.
The Germans needed that ball bearing industry to keep their planes and tanks moving. And we wiped out Schweinfurt along the same time. They were bombing Schweinfurt. And Mike knew I was going in the service. I was a good friend of Roop. And Mike said to look up this German girl that he went with named Charlotte.
Yeah.
I never connected with her, and I can't remember why, whether we just couldn't get out there or whether I couldn't locate her. But he gave me her name and address and everything, and I never did reach her. But Charlotte, he eventually married. They live in Natick, as you probably know.
Oh, really?
And I've seen Charlotte at the German club that I belong to. And Mike remembers that he gave me the note, said reach her, contact her.
So you
that
were
was
not far from Schweinfurt.
No, Schweinfurt is just outside Würzburg. I'm just guessing.
What are
Maybe
the other cities around Würzburg that you visited?
You know, Schaffenburg isn't too far away. There's a whole bunch of them, but the names I forget because I'm mixing them up with the next town that I went to, which was Regensburg. I stayed in Würzburg only maybe 4 months, and then we transferred to Regensburg. And again, that's very significant because I met my future wife in Regensburg. Regensburg is out the southwestern corner of Germany. It's on the Danube. Beautiful city, wasn't much damaged. And I was stationed out there for about 4 or 5 months, and I met my wife out there. My wife was Croatian, but when the Germans went into 1941, they went into Yugoslavia, knocked that off. They destroyed her house and village, so she went to Germany to work. She was only 15 in order to send money back to her family. So that I met her there. She worked actually in Berlin, and when
And
they,
how would you describe your life in the service?
very good everywhere I went. In
Even
fact,
overseas?
yeah. In fact, later on, after I went to 3rd Army headquarters in Heidelberg, I worked for officers, strictly officers, when I was transferred. I liked it so much I thought I was going to stay in. And when I came back, very interesting, I decided I wanted to go back in as a civilian. Back in those days, they were hiring civilians. And as a young kid, I went to Washington, and I sat in the Secretary of War's office, Secretary of War Patterson, to try to get back into Germany, because I wanted to go back and meet my wife. But I never got to talk to Patterson.
So you were out in 1946.
Right.
And you tried to go back in 47, is that it?
Right, but I didn't have a chance, so
Okay.
I went to school.
Okay. And what kind of schools did you go to when you were in the service? Did the service help you so far as your schools are concerned?
I'm trying to think back. No, I didn't go to school at all.
Did you take advantage of the GI Bill?
When I came back, yeah, we got $50 a month, and
And your books and your tuition?
I think we got books, and the tuition. I don't know. I think we paid our tuition. I can't remember.
And what school did you go to?
I went to BU, College of Business. I graduated in 1950. I had gone to BU in 1944 when I got out for about 6 or 7 months. Then I got drafted. So I had a half a year in BU, and I had saved some money. But maybe I did, the government did pay the tuition.
Yeah.
In those
and
days,
did that-
it wasn't much, really.
Yeah. And did that help you, did the GI Bill help you with your present vocation?
Well, being a college graduate helped me get a job. But Greg, the year that I got out, 1950, college graduates were a dime a dozen. I mean, everybody was out in 1950 that was in the service. And even though I had the college education, there were so many people graduated from college. I had a tough time getting a job. I went to work for a Caterpillar dealer in South Boston, and I got $36 a week, 90 cents an hour. That's what I started with.
In
there
those
was a lot.
days, was that good pay?
It wasn't bad, but it wasn't, I mean, now you look back. But within a year, I became parts manager.
And were you married at that time?
Yeah, I got married. My wife came over in 47. In June of 47, the Boston Herald had a picture of her coming down the gangplank at Logan. And we got married in September of 47.
So
We're
would
still
you describe her as a war bride?
Yeah, she was a war bride.
Okay.
Yeah.
Did you get married overseas, or did you get
I
married?
got married in the St. James Church. She's Catholic. There was a Father Kogi. There was a Catholic priest. We saw him. He told her, "You have to be married in a Catholic church." She says, "No, I'm marrying in his church." And
So you were
he was
married in Watertown?
I was married at St. James because I went to St. James as a kid,
Okay.
and my
Now-
kids were baptized at St. James.
How did you feel about the war?
I followed the war even before I went in the service. I used to do scrapbooks. An interesting thing, you never asked me where I was born.
Yes.
Okay,
Where were you born?
I was born in Marseille, France.
Ah,
See, my parents came over from the genocide. They went to Marseille. Like Marseille was taking a lot of people. There's a big Armenian colony. We lived in the waterfront. St. Vincent de Paul, that was the address. And I was born there in 27, and my father was going back and forth working. And we came over, my mother and I came over in 1928. And interesting enough, on a German boat, it was a German boat, but it was the biggest boat of the time, the Leviathan. It was well known.
yes, I remember the
The
Leviathan.
Leviathan was called in World War I the Fatherland. It was built in 1912, and that was used as a carrying immigrants and so forth. And in 1938, they scrapped the ship up in Scotland.
Okay.
So I came over actually as a French citizen, and my father in 1943 found out that they were drafting Frenchmen. I was 15 then. And he rushed me down to the Cambridge post office in Central Square and got me American citizenship papers so that I wouldn't get drafted.
How did you feel as a French citizen when Germany took over France?
Well, I'll tell you, in those days, I was really dyed-in-the-wool French. I hated the Germans. I had scrapbooks of the war. For some reason, I kept the scrapbook. And the guys used to sing the Marseillaise, and I really was all for France.
How did you feel when France surrendered to Germany and agreed to serve for Germany? I think Pétain was the president, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he was the collaborator.
Yeah,
But
did you
Greg,
feel
at
as if
that
you should
time, I was only 13.
13 years.
See, that was 1940,
Yeah.
and I was born in 27, so I really didn't have any big feelings except that
But
I
you
was
say you hated the
interested.
Germans.
Well, I was hoping that the French would knock them off, and I was
Yeah.
severely disappointed.
Okay.
But my feelings kind of changed after I got over to Europe, and I saw, I began to like everything I saw in Germany. I mean, the cities were destroyed, but I liked the way they were efficient, hardworking, and orderly.
And you
So
had seen the German prisoners at Camp Croft?
I'd
before
seen
that.
them at Camp Croft, and I'd seen some of them working in our casernes. Again, they were doing menial jobs, some of them. This is after the war. They were like civilians then.
Did you correspond with your family when you were in the service?
Yeah, I did that quite regularly, yeah.
Did you keep a diary?
I think somewhere there's still some of the old letters that I have somewhere up in the attic, because I had a sister, I still have a sister, and she was younger than I, and I did write my mother. They could barely read English. I'm sure somebody had to read
Write
the
to them in
letters.
French? I mean,
No, not French. I didn't know any French. In English. I just, the regular letters, I miss home and so
Tell me
forth.
if there's anything else with regard to your service that you'd like to relate. You can use the notes that you have.
No, I said what's on the notes. I think that for the year and a half I was in the service, of course I saw no action, no war. Everything was very pleasant.
But you saw the results of the war.
I saw the results of the war, horrified by all the people, and the only thing I want to add to it is that, having seen all this, I probably, in maybe the upper 1% of the veterans who follow the history of World War II at home. I have a tremendous amount of books on World War II, biographies of people. I have videotapes, I have cassettes, and I have an intense interest, as much as my time will allow. I don't have really time to read. I buy these war books on the Normandy for the next 2 months after June 6th, but I don't have much time to read it. But I have quite a collection of books.
Do you recall when you were in the United States that there was a great isolationist tendency in the United States before we entered the war? Were you any part of that, or how did you feel about it?
No, at that time, you mean with our government isolation as far as keeping away from the problems? I remember that as a kid going to high school.
Do you remember the public saying, we don't want to get into Europe's wars?
Yes, I remember that.
How strong was that, if you recall?
I think at the beginning it was quite strong, but I think that after Pearl Harbor and what happened over in France, that it turned everything around, and Roosevelt, I think, did a very good job in getting the country going.
Okay.
And Pearl Harbor really opened up a lot of eyes that we had to move forward.
Okay. Anything else you'd like to add?
Well,
when did you join Post 41?
I actually joined Post 41, I'm guessing it goes back a dozen years ago, but I didn't come much, and somehow I got dropped off, and I had to re-enter back 3 or 4 years ago, and I was surprised that I got dropped off, and maybe it's that I didn't pay dues for a year or two. I can't remember, but anyway.
You think these veterans organizations are doing a good job?
I think they're doing a good job, but I think that, I mean, I can see it with the ethnic club that I belong to. It's the membership is getting older. You're not drawing in the newer people, and that's a big concern.
But you didn't join a veterans organization until you were older, right?
That's true. That's true.
In other words, maybe the veterans that we're looking for are waiting. We're waiting for them to get old to join us.
Yeah. Well, we should try to get more attendance. And
yes.
I belong to this German-American club, and I do a lot of PR for them. And we're always trying to get new veterans, new members at our picnic sites. We do an Oktoberfest, a Summerfest, and we sign up a lot of people, and some of them are young, and that's what we're trying to get more younger blood. Our board at the German-American Club, the average age is 70 years old.
Now, so far as the German-American Club is concerned, who belongs to that? Do you have any veterans of German veterans?
Yeah, we have German veterans of the war on the German side. Some of my close friends were in the Wehrmacht.
And have you shared your experiences with them?
Not too much of my experiences, and they haven't shared too much of theirs. You know, they just
to be kind of mum about it.
Well, yeah, it goes so far back. I've been a member since '68. In those days, they used to talk more about it. But now we're up to year 2000, except for someone saying I lost a brother in Russia, or I had a brother in the Luftwaffe that went down. Most of those guys, I know that they lost somebody. It's something that so many years have gone by. Some of those guys are 80 now. Our club manager is 82, and he was in Russia. And he had some interesting story, but the thing that hit me really good was that when they were advancing that first summer, they'd go across these miles of nothing. He said, we were asking ourselves, what the hell are we doing in Russia? What is there that we want? Why are we dying for this country? They'd go through these towns that were like shacks.
Vast expanses
Vast expanses of nothing, and they kept saying, why are we here?
So well, they did have an opportunity to question their leaders.
They did, yeah. He said, and he was a communications switchboard operator, and he was in one of Guderian's things. By the way, Guderian,
General Guderian.
I am a student, and I've done research on General Heinz Guderian. In fact, yes. I am emailing a great-great-granddaughter of his, and I have a contact in Germany that's a descendant of Guderian, and I'm determined to find out whether there is Armenian going back a couple of hundred years. And I emailed this woman, she's on the West Coast, and she said they recently, I'm sorry, not recently, many years ago, had a Guderian reunion. And at the reunion, it was felt that way back there was Armenian background there. There was a book written in German. She gave me Guderian's relative that wrote the book, where he's located. I got an email, and I'm going to follow up on that.
Very good.
And I'm going to get a copy of that book. It's in German. Her family had a copy. They gave it to someone to translate to English, and somehow it got lost. This goes many years ago. So I'm going to email this guy. I've got his address and everything, and I've got a German, we have German friends. I'm going to get the book translated. I'm particularly interested in the Armenian because I often felt that with that name, his mother's name was Clara, but unlike the Germans that start with a K, she started with a C, which is where the Armenians do.
Yes.
And I got to tell you one interesting more story about Guderian that's very interesting. When I was in Würzburg, I met a girl named Mariana Lutz, L-U-T-Z. Mariana was the daughter of General Lutz, who was head of the Panzers before Guderian took over. Guderian became Lutz's adjutant in Würzburg. And Mariana used to say, Guderian's over our house all the time in Würzburg. And I kept thinking, she's giving me a lot of baloney. When I researched it after the war, Guderian was in Würzburg. Guderian worked for General Lutz. When Hitler took over, he kicked Lutz out because Lutz was an old guy.
Yes.
And he appointed Guderian head of the Panzer forces.
Yes.
And Mariana was a girlfriend of mine. I still got General Lutz's, one of his medallions at home somewhere. I didn't look for it.
Okay.
But that's an interest, that's how I got interested in Guderian also.
Guderian was a very active, he argued very actively with Hitler.
Yeah, Hitler kicked him out.
Yes.
And then put him back in.
Yes, he put him back in, and he was very thankful.
I have books on Guderian home, and Guderian had a son who was also Heinz that's now 87. And Heinz went into the Army, and he became Inspector General just like his father. He retired some 10 years ago.
German Army.
Yeah, Inspector General. And I got a picture of Heinz home. You look at this guy. He was in that, during the war, he was an officer in the 116th Panzers. And it's unbelievable how time goes on. So, that's it.
If that's it, then we'll conclude this interview with Jack Achmakjian, Post 41, Watertown, Massachusetts. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Greg, very much.
Okay.
It's good to talk about some of this stuff because you don't have a chance to talk about it. I'm fortunate that all my experiences were good.
Yes.
And I didn't see combat, and everything come out very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Okay, now, Jack, you were mentioning to us that you actually visited the house of Field Marshal Rommel.
Yeah.
Could you describe that to us?
Well, I'll tell you, as I said, Guderian and Rommel were the two generals that I always followed closely. Guderian because I thought he was Armenian way back, and Rommel because Rommel was good to the prisoners and so forth, and I thought he was a very capable general, and I don't think he believed in the war. So I always followed Rommel's history, and at home I've got 4 books on Rommel, but I always wanted to visit Rommel's villa where he lived. So back about 4 years ago, my wife and I, we try to go back to Germany about every 3 years.
Where is Rommel's house?
Rommel lived in a town called Herrlingen. It's right outside of Ulm, U-L-M, which is not too far from Stuttgart. So we took a ride out to Ulm, and we stopped in, my wife went in someplace, cathedral, talked to someone, and they told us where he was. And we went and visited the cemetery. I have a picture of the plot. The cemetery has an iron cross, and that's where...
That's where Rommel was buried?
Yeah, that's
with his family?
With his wife.
Okay.
And it's a secluded thing right within a few hundred yards of his house. We visited the house, and I was lucky. The German engineer that lives there came out and talked to me. We took pictures in Rama's backyard in the driveway. It's just like the movie. And then we visited the exact place that he committed suicide, up on the hill where he took the poison. The Germans erected a plaque up there, a stone plaque. So between where he committed suicide and the cemetery in his house, it's all like a mile and a half in that town of Hellingen.
So we can assume that they took him out for about a mile, he committed suicide,
Right.
and they brought him back.
Not even a mile, a half a mile up the hill. And the whole story is all in these books. They really told him that commit suicide. They gave him a state funeral in Ulm, and they got all the awards and, you know, the good talk.
All the eulogies.
But it didn't come out till later on that he had to
This
take
is what he
poison. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much,
Okay.
Jack.